Subscribe now and witness how an arrogant man loses absolutely everything on the night of his absolute triumph by underestimating the woman he thought he had discarded. The silent player. The cold, polished marble of the grand ballroom not only reflected the light of thousands of crystals, but also the moment a man's entire world shattered. Robert Sterling believed he had orchestrated the perfect life. He had discarded his quiet, simple ex-wife, Amelia, as if she were a passé trend, and now arrived at the year's most exclusive event, the Beaumont Foundation Gala, with his dazzling new mistress, Victoria, on his arm. He was ready to consolidate his status among the elite, but he forgot a crucial rule of high society. The most powerful pieces on the board are often the ones that move in silence. Chapter 1. The Sapphire Mirror. The glossy black Rolls-Royce Ghost whispered through the rain-slicked streets of Manhattan, its tires hissing almost imperceptibly against the asphalt. Inside, insulated from the distant symphony of city horns and sirens, sat Robert Sterling. He adjusted the bespoke silk lapels of his Loro Piana tuxedo, the fabric so fine it felt like captured air. Beside him, Victoria Vance sighed, the sound a practiced expression of bored luxury. She tilted her phone, the screen illuminating her surgically precise features as she snapped a selfie. A diamond choker, so dense with stones it looked like a solid band of light, glittered at her neck. "I hope this isn't hideously boring, Robbie," she murmured, fluffing her platinum hair. "These charity things are always the same. Old men talking about taxes and their wives in last year's Dior." Robert chuckled, a low, confident sound. "Not this one, darling. This is the Beaumont Gala. Getting an invitation is the prize. This isn't just old money. This is original money. The Beaumonts own the steel in these buildings, the banks that fund them, and the art that hangs in them. Tonight, we don't just attend. We arrive." Victoria pouted. "And you're sure your deal is going to close? Walter Beaumont himself will be there, won't he? You need to introduce me." "Walter Beaumont is practically a recluse," Robert said, waving a dismissive hand. "But his board is here. My new project is virtually funded by their shadow network. After tonight, the Sterling name will finally carry the weight it deserves." His gaze drifted to the rain-streaked window. The city lights blurred into a watercolor of neon and gold. For a fleeting, annoying instant, a different face flashed in his mind. Amelia, his ex-wife. The word felt like ash in his mouth. He remembered her, not in silk, but in worn jeans and a faded university sweatshirt, always with a book in her hand and flour on her nose from some ridiculous baking attempt. She was simple, sweet, quiet, and completely, utterly normal. He had married her in a rush of naive, youthful feeling. He had been a junior associate, and she had been, well, just Amelia. A librarian, or a barista, or something equally useless. He couldn't even remember. Their divorce had been finalized 6 months ago. A clean, brutal amputation. "What are you thinking about?" Victoria asked, her voice sharp. Sensing his attention had drifted, Robert blinked, the memory dissolving. He smiled, placing his hand over hers, his fingers tracing the cold diamonds. "Just thinking about how pathetic my life was before, how small." He remembered their final meeting in the lawyer's office. Amelia had been pale, quiet, but tearless. That had almost annoyed him more. She wore a simple navy dress, her hands folded in her lap. "Robert, you don't have to do this," she had said, her voice low. "Yes, Amelia, I do," he had snapped, adjusting his tie. "I am destined for things you can't even comprehend. I need a partner, not an anchor. Victoria understands ambition. She understands me. You were comfortable." He had left her a token sum. just enough to be considered generous by the courts, but not enough for her to be comfortable for long. He imagined her now, probably sharing a small apartment in Queens with 2 other women, serving coffee to people like him. The thought gave him a satisfying mixture of pity and power. He had escaped. "You're right," Victoria said, leaning in, her perfume filling the car. "You were trapped. Now you're with me." The Rolls-Royce turned onto Fifth Avenue, joining a procession of gleaming vehicles inching toward the Metropolitan Museum of Art, its grand facade illuminated like a temple against the dark sky. The Beaumont Foundation had rented the entire Egyptian wing. "Exactly," Robert said, squeezing her hand. "She was nothing. And tonight is everything." He stepped out of the car, the paparazzi flashes exploding in their faces. He offered his arm to Victoria, who emerged like a movie star, all teeth and diamonds. He felt a surge of triumph. This was his world. He had taken it. No one, especially an insignificant, forgotten ex-wife, could touch him here. Chapter 2. The Dance of Ignorance. 3 miles south, in a penthouse overlooking Central Park, the atmosphere was one of quiet, controlled tension. The apartment was not the opulent, gilded cage Robert inhabited. It was a masterpiece of minimalist warmth. Rich woods, soft gray cashmere sofas, and walls dominated by stunning floor-to-ceiling windows. The art on the walls wasn't ostentatious. It was invaluable. A small Rothko here, a subtle de Kooning there. Amelia Sloane stood before a full-length mirror, not in a faded sweatshirt, but in a column of deep sapphire velvet. The dress was a bespoke Givenchy, a piece of mastery and restraint. It had no sequins, no vulgar cutouts. Its power lay in its perfect simplicity, the way it fell from her shoulders to the floor. Her only jewelry was a pair of antique diamond earrings and a singular heavy necklace, a cascade of sapphires culminating in the legendary Beaumont star, a stone so famous it was rarely seen outside a vault. Her hand, however, was trembling. "You are staring at it," said a voice from the doorway. Amelia turned. An older woman, impeccably dressed in a Chanel suit, leaned against the doorframe. It was Beatrice, her grandfather's chief of staff, but to Amelia, she had been a confidant and protector for the last 5 years. "It feels heavy, Beatrice," Amelia admitted, touching the central sapphire. "It is, dear," Beatrice said softly, walking closer. She adjusted the drape of the velvet over Amelia's shoulder. "It carries the weight of a name you have been running from for 5 years. Are you truly ready for this? You don't have to go." Amelia looked at her reflection. She saw the same eyes, the same quiet mouth. But the woman looking back was not the girl who had met Robert Sterling in a campus coffee shop. That girl had been an experiment. After graduating from Yale, Amelia had been terrified of the Beaumont name. She had seen what it did to people. She had seen men grovel, women intrigue, and friends turn into sycophants. She had watched her cousins become lazy, entitled monsters, defined only by wealth they hadn't earned. So she had made a deal with her formidable grandfather, Walter Beaumont. "Let me live," she had pleaded. "Just for a few years, let me just be Amelia. Let me have a real job, real friends, and find someone who loves me, not the name." Walter, a man who only respected strength and audacity, had agreed. 5 years, Amelia," he had boomed. "Go, be poor, be normal, learn what the world is really like. But when I call you, you come home, and you come home ready." And so she had. She moved into a small apartment, worked as a research assistant at the NYPL, and lived off her salary. It was there, over a stack of books, that she literally bumped into Robert Sterling. He was charming, ambitious, and seemed to love her quiet intelligence. She had fallen genuinely, completely in love. She had thought she had found him, the one person who loved only Amelia. The fantasy lasted 3 years. Then, as Robert's own ambition began to sour into a bitter, restless greed, she became an obstacle. His compliments turned to criticisms. "Why are you still at that dead-end job, Amelia? Don't you want more?" He wanted more. More money. More status. More shine. And she, in her quiet world of book and simple dinners, was not bright enough. The day he introduced her to Victoria, a work client, she knew. The test her grandfather had set for the world, she had applied to Robert. And he had failed. The divorce had been a quiet, scorching agony. Not because she was losing his money, she had more than he could ever dream of, but because he had proven her grandfather right. He hadn't loved her. He had only loved the idea of a wife, and she hadn't been the right model. Now the 5 years were up, and her grandfather had called. "He'll be there, you know," Amelia said to Beatrice, her voice hardening. "Robert," Beatrice nodded, her expression grim. "We know. His invitation was secured through a junior partner of one of our subsidiaries. He's been bragging for weeks that he's inches away from a deal with the foundation." "He has no idea," Amelia murmured. "None," Beatrice confirmed. "To him, you are still the insignificant librarian he discarded. He thinks he is rising. He has no idea he is walking into the lion's den. And the lioness has been waiting." Amelia took a deep breath. The trembling in her hands ceased. The velvet felt less like a dress and more like armor. The Beaumont star felt cold and solid against her skin. A talisman of the power she had tried to escape, but was now ready to claim. Robert wanted to be in the Beaumont world, Amelia said, her voice dropping to a cold, even tone. He was so desperate to be invited to their party. She stepped away from the mirror, her eyes clear and cold. Let's not disappoint him. Chapter 3. The Vengeance Script. The Great Hall of the Egyptian Wing was a cavern of impossible grandeur. Ancient statues of pharaohs and goddesses stood silent guard as the modern royalty of the city floated among them. The air was thick with the scent of lilies, expensive perfume, and the quiet electrical hum of immense wealth. Impeccably uniformed waiters moved like shadows, offering crystal flutes of Dom Perignon and canapes topped with caviar and gold leaf. Robert Sterling was in his element. "That's Governor DeWitt," he whispered to Victoria, subtly nudging her toward the politician. "And there's the entire Guggenheim board. Smile, darling. You look spectacular." Victoria, encased in a backless emerald green Versace gown that screamed for attention, did as she was told. She was a perfect accessory, and Robert used her to great effect, navigating the room, dropping his name, and laughing a little too loudly. "Robert, good to see you." A man named Peterson, a junior VP at a rival firm, clapped him on the back. "Heard you're about to land the big one, the Beaumont deal. How'd you swing that?" Robert shrugged with feigned modesty, as if it were nothing. "You know, hard work, the right connections. They see potential." He was reveling in the envy, soaking it up. He had made it. He was a player. He felt a vindictive thrill. "Take that, Amelia. Is this the world you were holding me back from?" He scanned the room, looking for his next target, perhaps a board member, when the entrance to the hall went strangely quiet. The background chatter diminished. A few heads turned, then a few more. Robert swung around, annoyed by the distraction, and then he froze. A woman was descending the grand staircase. She was alone. She was neither flanked by an entourage, nor rushing. She moved with an unhurried, liquid grace. The crowd parted for her not out of obligation, but out of an instinctive magnetic pull. She wore a simple dress of deep sapphire velvet. The light of the grand hall seemed to ignore the jet set and focus on her. Robert's first thought was, That's an extraordinary dress. His second thought, which hit him like a physical blow, was, I know that woman. He squinted. It couldn't be. The woman who shuffled around his apartment in fuzzy socks and cried over sad movies? The woman who preferred a night at the library to a black tie event? Who is that? Victoria hissed beside him, her voice tight with sudden sharp jealousy. She's not famous. I'd know her. The woman reached the foot of the stairs. She lifted her head, her gaze sweeping the room with a calm evaluation that was utterly alien to him. And her eyes met his. It was Amelia. Robert's champagne glass tilted, the liquid spilling over his hand. He didn't notice. It was as if the laws of physics had been temporarily suspended. Time slowed. He saw her, but it was a her he could not process. Her hair, usually pulled into a simple ponytail, was styled in a soft, elegant chignon. Her face, without the heavy makeup Victoria preferred, was luminous. And the necklace, even from across the room, pulsed with a cold blue fire. Robbie, what is wrong? Victoria tugged his arm. You look like you've seen a ghost. That is... Robert swallowed, his throat dry. That is my ex-wife. Victoria's head snapped back, her perfectly sculpted eyebrows raised. She looked at Amelia, then back at Robert. And then she burst out laughing, a sharp, brittle sound. That's Amelia, the little librarian. Darling, you must be mistaken. That woman is... Well, just look at her. It's her, Robert insisted, his mind racing, trying to find a logical framework. How was this possible? How did she get in here? He found his answer immediately, a wave of relief washing over him, followed by a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. She's personal, he said, his voice hard. She must be, or she's a +1. She must have latched onto some fool. A +1, Victoria scoffed, her confidence returning now that she had a narrative. Look at her. Clearly she's someone's entertainment. How pathetic. Did she come here just to see what she's missing? Robert's face darkened. The idea of Amelia, his discarded wife, being in the same room as him, breathing the same air, was an insult. It was a contamination of his triumph. She's probably serving the canapes, Victoria added with a cruel giggle. I don't care what she is, Robert growled, straightening his tuxedo. She doesn't belong here. This is my night. He began shouldering his way through the crowd, his eyes fixed on the woman in the blue velvet dress. He was Robert Sterling. He was an invited guest. She was a ghost, a nobody, and he was about to put her in her place. Chapter 4. The Annihilation. Amelia had spotted him the moment he had spotted her. She had felt the laser focus of his gaze, the familiar heat of his anger. She had seen him tense, watched his confusion, and then the sneer. She watched him talk to Victoria, saw Victoria's sharp, mocking laugh. It was all so predictable. It was almost disappointing. She had been in the room for less than 5 minutes, and already a small circle of silence was forming around her. People didn't know who she was, but they knew she was someone. She simply stood near an imposing statue of Sekhmet, waiting patiently. She didn't have to seek anyone out. The room would come to her. She just hadn't expected Robert to be the first. Well, 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 a voice dripping with contempt said. Amelia turned slowly. Robert was before her, his face a mask of smug superiority. Victoria was plastered to his side, her green dress clashing horribly with the ancient red granite of the statue. She was smirking, looking Amelia up and down, with an expression of profound disdain. Robert, Amelia said. Her voice was quiet, without a shred of emotion. Victoria, you both look exactly as I expected. Victoria's smirk wavered. It was not the greeting of a nobody. What are you doing here, Amelia? Robert demanded, keeping his voice low, but making no effort to hide his furious tone. This is a private event. Did you sneak in? Sneak in? Amelia repeated, tilting her head. No, Robert, I was invited. Invited? Victoria exclaimed, her voice several decibels too loud, drawing glances. By whom? The catering company? Don't tell me you're one of the event coordinators. She waved her hand dismissively. You can drop the act. We know your staff. Robert crossed his arms, playing the role of the amused, powerful man. Amelia, look. I don't know what game you're playing, but it's pathetic. Even for you. Coming here to... what? Try to make me jealous? Look at this place. He gestured expansively. This is my world. You had your chance to be part of it, and you weren't good enough. It's over. Go back to the kitchen or wherever you crawled out of. The cruelty was so blatant, so childish, it barely stung. It was like being insulted by a shouting toddler. All she felt was a deep, cold pity. That's quite a good speech, Robert, she said, her voice remaining perfectly level. Did you practice it? Robert's face flushed. He was used to her shrinking, to her quiet tears. This composure was new, and it was infuriating. I'm not joking, he hissed, taking another step closer. You are an embarrassment. You're here, in a rented dress. Rented? Victoria sneered, her eyes lighting on the necklace. She finally looked at it. Her eyes widened. My God, that's the worst fake I've ever seen. Is it paste? How tacky. Trying to look like you belong. You should have worn your old apron, dear. It would have been more honest. Amelia did not look at Victoria. Her gaze remained locked on Robert. You always had a problem with authenticity, Robert, she said softly. You could never tell the difference between what shines and what is valuable. Enough, Robert snapped. He was losing control. People were looking. This was not the power move he had intended. I am a guest of the Beaumont Foundation. I am this close to finalizing a career-defining partnership. For you to be here, looking like a cheap imposter, is a liability. I am going to have to ask security to remove you. He gestured to a nearby security guard, a large man with a discreet earpiece. Excuse me, officer. This woman is not on the list. She's gate crashing. The security guard looked at Robert. Then he looked at Amelia. He gave a small, almost imperceptible bow of his head. Sir, the guard said, his voice monotone, his eyes on Robert. I assure you, she is on the list. Robert stared, baffled. What? There must be a mistake. She's my... I heard you, Robert. Amelia cut in, her voice suddenly like ice. You told me I was an anchor. You told me I was comfortable and small. You told me I wasn't good enough for your world. She took a step toward him. Robert, what? Instinctively took a step back. You have no idea, Amelia continued, what you are talking about. You never have. You walk into this hall, rented by my family. You drink my family's champagne, and you try to network with my family's employees, all while trying to have me, removed. A slow, creeping horror began to crawl into Robert's eyes, but his ego wouldn't let him accept it. Your family? He spat, forcing a laugh. Your family? Your father was a college professor who died broke. You have nobody. You are nothing. He's right, you know, Victoria interjected, clinging to the narrative. You're just a pathetic, bitter ex-wife. Go away now, Victoria, Amelia said, turning to her for the first time, her gaze so sharp, Victoria physically recoiled. That paste necklace you're sneering at, that is the Beaumont Star. It is worth more than your entire building. And this rented dress? Amelia brushed her hand over the velvet. It was a gift from my grandfather. Robert's blood ran cold. Your grandfather is... Chapter 5. The Fall of the False King. Before Amelia could answer, the lights of the grand hall dimmed. A spotlight hit the small stage at the far end of the room, near the entrance to the Temple of Dendur. The murmurs in the hall died. A tall, white-haired man, radiating an aura of absolute, undisputed power, walked to the podium. He tapped the microphone. It was Walter Beaumont. "Good evening," his voice boomed, echoing against the ancient stone. "Welcome. I trust you are all enjoying yourselves." Robert was paralyzed. He couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. His eyes darted from Walter Beaumont on the stage to Amelia, who now watched the stage with an expression of quiet affection. No, it's not possible. It's a coincidence. She's lying. I won't keep you long," Walter continued. "I am an old man, and I prefer to get to the point. We are here to raise money for children's hospitals, but we are also here with a second purpose. A family reunion." A murmur swept through the crowd. "For 5 years," Walter said, his voice softening only a fraction, "a vital part of my family, a piece of my own heart, has been on a journey. A journey to see the world not from the top, but from the inside. To live and work and love among you, without the burden or the shield of a name." Robert was trembling. His mind screamed, "Turn around! Leave! Get out!" But he was pinned to the spot. "She wanted to know if she could be loved for herself," Walter said, his eyes scanning the crowd, seeming to pierce Robert. "She wanted to see what people were truly made of. I'd say her experiment was a resounding success. She has learned," Walter smiled, "and now her sabbatical is over. It is time for her to come home." The silence in the hall was absolute. Every eye was fixed on Walter Beaumont, a man whose rare public appearances were legendary. He was the king, and this was his court. Victoria's nails dug into Robert's arm. "Robbie," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is he talking about? What is happening?" Robert couldn't answer. A cold sweat had broken out on his forehead. His blood pounded in his ears. A rhythmic "oh, no, no, no." He looked at Amelia. She was no longer looking at him. Her attention was fully on the man on the stage. "The future of an empire," Walter Beaumont continued, his voice ringing with authority, "is not in its steel, nor in its banks, nor in its art. It is in its blood. It is in the character of its leadership. For 5 years I have been worried. I watched a generation grow entitled, believing Beaumont was a privilege, not a responsibility." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "So I sent my brightest, my best, into the world to learn the difference. And tonight, she has returned to us, ready to take her place." Walter looked over the sea of faces, his gaze passing governors, billionaires, and artists, until he found the woman in the blue velvet dress. His entire expression, so formidable a moment before, softened with a surge of deep, undeniable love. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his voice swollen with pride, "our distinguished guests, it is my immense privilege to introduce to you the future of the Beaumont Foundation, the new head of our global acquisitions, and my granddaughter, Amelia Beaumont Sloan." A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. It was not a whisper. It was a physical shockwave. 300 of the world's most powerful figures turned their heads as one, their gazes following Walter's hand. The spotlight that had been on Walter snapped off, and a second later, a circle of bright, blindingly white light illuminated Amelia. She stood there, bathed in the beam, her expression serene, her sapphire necklace bursting into blue fire. For Robert Sterling, the world tilted, fragmented, and then shattered into 1,000,000 pieces. Beaumont, Sloan, Amelia, Beaumont, Sloan. His mind flashed back with sudden, agonizing clarity. Amelia looking at financial pages. "I'm just curious about the market, Robert." Amelia excusing herself from his own office parties. "I'm not much for networking, Robert." Amelia in the divorce court, quietly refusing the generous settlement. "I don't want your money, Robert. I just want this to be over." It wasn't humility. It wasn't simplicity. It was indifference. She hadn't wanted his generous $20,000 settlement because she owned the building they were in. Victoria let out a small, strangled squeal. Her hand flew from Robert's arm to her own mouth, her eyes, wide with near-comical horror, darting between Robert and Amelia. "Robbie," she whispered, the word laced with venom. "Did you divorce a Beaumont?" Robert couldn't speak. His lungs had ceased functioning. He watched, numb, as Amelia, his Amelia, Amelia Beaumont, the woman he had called small, normal, and an anchor, began to walk. The crowd did not merely part for her. It stepped back, creating a wide, reverent path from the statue of Sekhmet to the stage. The silence was only broken by the click of her heels on the marble and the sudden frantic burst of camera shutters from the press balcony. They knew. Everyone knew. The biggest story of the decade had just erupted. The mysterious heiress, the invisible Beaumont, was finally public. Amelia walked past Robert. She did not look at him. She did not give him a glance. He was a statue, a pillar of salt, as insignificant as the granite pharaoh behind him. He was, to her, completely and utterly invisible. She reached the stage and took her grandfather's hand. He kissed her cheek, the applause finally erupting, roaring through the hall. "She looks like her grandmother," Walter said into the microphone, his voice thick with emotion. Amelia stepped to the podium. She looked out at the crowd, her gaze sweeping over them all, serene, calm, and in total control. "Thank you, grandfather," she said, her voice clear and strong, reaching every corner of the hall. "It's good to be home." Her eyes finally moved toward where Robert and Victoria stood, frozen in their own personal hell. She did not glare. She did not smirk. She just looked at them, a simple, assessing, utterly devastating look of disregard, a look that said, "You are nothing." Robert's legs gave way. He stumbled back, leaning against a velvet rope. It was over. He was not just ruined. He was annihilated. And the woman who had done it was the same one he had thrown away for being nothing. The applause was deafening, but to Robert, it sounded like the roar of a giant wave about to drown him. "And so," Amelia concluded, "I am thrilled to announce our first major project under this new initiative, a complete divestiture of—" She paused, as if checking a mental note. "Ah, yes, the Sterling Group and any of its subsidiaries." Robert's heart stopped. "What?" Victoria's head snapped toward him, her eyes burning. "What did she say?" "Our due diligence has found irregularities," Amelia continued, her voice cool and professional. "And frankly, a lack of vision. We will be redirecting those funds, effective immediately, to the new children's wing at St. Jude's. Thank you." She smiled. The applause was even louder. This was not a social slight. This was an execution. Robert's phone, silent in his pocket, suddenly began to vibrate. And again, and again. A relentless, frantic buzzing. He didn't need to look. He knew what it was. It was his partners, his investors, his entire professional life, which he had built on the rumor of a Beaumont deal, evaporating in real time. "You!" Victoria hissed, her voice a low, vicious growl. "You idiot! You absolute catastrophic fool!" "Victoria, wait!" Robert stammered, grabbing her arm. "Don't touch me!" she shrieked, pulling her arm away. The sound was so piercing it cut through the applause, and several people turned. "You told me she was nobody. You told me you were the prize. You left me to mock her." Victoria's face was a grotesque mask of panic. She wasn't just angry. She was terrified. In this world, hitching your wagon to the wrong man was a survivable error. The betrayal of a Beaumont was not. Chapter 6. The Debt of Irrelevance. The rest of the gala was an exquisite torture for Robert Sterling. He couldn't leave. The exit was near the stage, and to get there, he would have to pass Amelia. To stay was to endure the silent judgment of an entire class of people he had tried to join. He was trapped in the temple of his own ambition. He retreated to a dark corner, near a defunct bar, and watched Amelia. She was magnificent. She moved through the room not with Victoria's arrogance, but with the quiet, unassailable confidence of one who owned the very ground she stood on. She remembered names, discussed policy, and laughed with a genuine warmth that drew people in. This was the woman he had called simple, the woman he had told, "You just don't understand ambition." His stomach churned. He realized, with mounting horror, that his ambition was a thimble. Hers was an ocean. He saw Victoria across the room. She hadn't fled the building but was attempting to recover. She had cornered a young tech billionaire, Leo. She laughed, touched his arm, deploying the same weapons she had used on Robert. Leo listened for a moment, then leaned in and whispered something. Victoria's face went white. She pulled her hand back as if burned. Leo smiled with a reptilian coldness and walked away, leaving her alone. A moment later, 2 security guards approached Victoria. They simply stood near her, a polite, silent escort. It's time to go. Her parasitic existence was over. Beatrice's last act. Robert, a walking dead man, finally found the strength to move. He had to get out. He skirted the edge of the hall, his head low, his shoulders slumped. He was almost at the grand staircase when a voice stopped him. "Mr. Sterling." He flinched. It was Beatrice, the older woman he had seen with Amelia. She stood in his path, an expression of faint disgust, as if inspecting an insect. "I believe this is yours," she said, holding out the invitation Robert had so proudly presented at the door. She handed it to him. Robert, confused, took it. Don took it. "Mrs. Beaumont Sloane," Beatrice said, her voice crisp, "is a kind woman. She could have had you arrested for trespassing. She allowed your entry based on a pending proposal, a proposal that, as you heard, is now null and void. Therefore, your invitation was revoked the moment Mrs. Beaumont Sloane stepped onto the stage. Your presence is no longer required here, or should I say no longer tolerated. She was a chief of staff, yet she wielded the power of an executioner. She did this," Robert whispered, the last embers of his rage igniting. "She planned this. It was all a trap." Beatrice almost smiled. "Mr. Sterling, you fundamentally misunderstand. Amelia did not set a trap for you. She is the trap. You are a man who built his entire life on a facade, and you just ran, head first, into the only person in this city who is 100% real." She stepped aside. "Good night. Do not attempt to contact Mrs. Beaumont Sloane. Do not attempt to contact anyone at the Foundation. Our lawyers will handle your full separation from our world. Be thankful she is merciful. Her grandfather wanted you sent to a black site." The final cold threat hung in the air. Robert, trembling, stumbled past her and practically ran up the stairs, desperate for the exit. As he burst through the main doors, the rain was falling harder. The paparazzi were still there, but they were not interested in him. His Rolls-Royce chauffeur was gone. He had likely already been notified that his client's credit was extinguished. He stood on the steps of the Met in his $10,000 tuxedo, completely ruined. He had no car, no job, no mistress, no future. He had entered this night as a king, and he left as less than a peasant. He had thrown away a diamond because he thought it was a stone. And worst of all, the part that would haunt him for the rest of his pathetic life was that he finally understood it. He had never been in the game at all. He had only been a pawn in hers. Chapter 7. The Queen's Awakening. Later that night, long after the last guest had departed, Amelia stood on her grandfather's private penthouse terrace. The rain had ceased, and the lights of Manhattan glittered like a carpet of fallen stars. She had changed out of her velvet dress into simple silk pajamas. The door opened behind her. Walter Beaumont, jacket off, tie loosened, stepped out to join her. He put a heavy, warm arm around her shoulder. "You were magnificent, my child," he said, his voice rumbling with pride. "You were your grandmother, reborn." "I was terrified," Amelia admitted, leaning her head on his chest. "Courage is not the absence of fear, Amelia. You know that. You did what you had to do." "Beatrice told me Robert, left," Amelia said quietly. Walter grunted. "Like a whipped dog. Good riddance. He was a parasite, Amelia. A small, greedy man. I knew it the day you brought him to lunch, and he spent the entire time looking at my art instead of at you." "I know. I think I knew too. I just wanted to be wrong." "You were young," Walter said, patting her shoulder. "You wanted to believe in the fairy tale. That is not a crime. You wanted a man who loved only Amelia. But the truth, my dear, is that there is no only Amelia. You are Amelia Beaumont Sloane. The only Amelia was a disguise, but the woman underneath was always you. You cannot separate the woman from the power. The right man won't fear it. He will respect it. He will love all of you, not just the part you pretended to be." Amelia looked up at him. "You set me a hard test, grandfather." "The world is a hard place," he said simply. "But you passed. You learned what money can't buy. You learned what people are. And you learned to be strong, not with my name, but with your own mind. Now you have both. The agony of Robert's betrayal, the humiliation of the divorce. It had all been a crucible. It had burned away the naive girl and forged the woman who had walked onto that stage. Robert had not destroyed her. He had completed her. "What about Victoria?" Amelia asked. Walter waved a dismissive hand. "A gnat. She'll be working retail in New Jersey by Christmas. Forget her. They were both beneath you. They were a mistake in judgment. And we, my dear, do not dwell on our mistakes. We learn and move on." "What's next?" Amelia asked. Walter smiled a true wolf's grin. "What's next? 8 a.m. tomorrow. We go to the office. You have a portfolio to review, a board to terrify, and an empire to run. And I, finally, am going to take a vacation." "Just one more thing," Walter said, turning her to face him. "That necklace was your grandmother's. She wore it the night she told me she was taking over the firm. She was, like you, the smartest person in the room. Never, ever let a small man make you feel small again." "I won't," Amelia promised, and she meant it. She looked out at the city. She was not a hidden heiress. She was not a betrayed wife. She was the woman who owned the board. Robert thought he was a king, but he had forgotten the most important piece. The queen is the most powerful of all, and she had just begun. Final call to action. The rise of Amelia is an epic reminder of self-worth. If you were Amelia, would you have allowed Robert to find out your identity in a less public way? Or was the silent annihilation the perfect karma? Voice your opinion in the comments. If you loved this story of vengeance and the triumph of intelligence, give it a like right now. And to avoid missing new stories of drama and power, make sure to subscribe. Epilogue. The debt of irrelevance. The erasure of Robert Sterling. The consequences of the Beaumont Gala were not a loud explosion. They were a silent, systematic deletion. For Robert Sterling, the world he had fought so fiercely to enter simply faded away. His phone, which had buzzed itself dead with furious messages from partners and investors the night of the gala, was now eerily silent. His calls went unanswered. His emails bounced back from servers he no longer had access to. He was a ghost. He returned to his luxury condo only to find his key fob deactivated. A polite yet firm doorman informed him the building board had enacted a moral clause and his lease was terminated. When he finally gained access, escorted by security, the apartment was a resonant tomb. The Loro Piana suits and Patek Philippe watches felt like costumes from a play that had abruptly closed. He was not just ruined, he was irrelevant. His name was scrubbed from society pages. His exclusive club memberships were indefinitely suspended, and his digital footprint was meticulously erased by the silent, terrifyingly efficient Beaumont PR machine. The last trace of him was selling off his assets at a catastrophic loss to pay off a fraction of his furious, abandoned partner's demands. He was last seen boarding a bus on the outskirts of the city, a man without a future, haunted by the ghost of a wife he had never truly known. Victoria Vance's consolation prize. Victoria Vance's fall was swifter and more public. A single photo of her at the gala, her face contorted in a sneer as she mocked Amelia, had a brief, brutal life on gossip blogs before she, too, was deleted. She became a whispered warning at cocktail parties. Walter's prediction had been kind. She was not in New Jersey. She was spotted by a Vogue editor she had once tried to impress, working at a perfume counter in a high-end department store. Her dazzling smile was now a fixed, desperate mask. The woman who demanded diamonds was settling for spritzing cheap fragrances on strangers' wrists. Amelia's reward. As for Amelia, life continued. She simply worked. On the Monday after the gala, she arrived at the Beaumont Tower at 6 a.m., not to her grandfather's ancestral office, but to a modern workspace she had commissioned on a lower floor. She wanted to be close to her teams. She wasn't tearing down the old boys' club with force. She was simply outworking them, outthinking them, and outmaneuvering them. At an event a month later, a fundraiser for the New York Public Library, her former sanctuary, she had slipped away from the speeches and was examining a rare manuscript collection. A man startled her. He wasn't wearing a designer tuxedo, but a slightly rumpled tweed jacket that smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. "That's a first edition of The Age of Innocence," the man said, his eyes kind. "I've always loved it," Amelia said, a genuine smile returning. She was not a hidden heiress. She was not a betrayed wife. She was the woman who owned the board and the woman who loved ancient books. She was, for the first time, not two separate people. She was, finally, simply Amelia. As she slipped a simple business card into his pocket, bearing a name and a number from a professor named Owen, she smiled. It wasn't a contract. It wasn't a proposal. It was just a new chapter, and she was ready to write it. Robert learned the hard way that you should never underestimate the person you discard. They might just own the world you are desperately trying to enter. Karma is not just seeing your enemy fall. It's realizing you were never on their level.